It's past midnight in Katy, Texas. A calm, humid night. The kind where the air feels heavy and time seems to stand still. Inside a quiet suburban home, two twins are fast asleep in their separate rooms. They've lived their whole lives side by side, sharing the same birthday, the same laughter, even the same dreams. But in just a few minutes, one of those dreams will turn into a nightmare. And before dawn, one twin will be gone. The other will be covered in blood. Still holding the knife. And whispering into the phone, "I think I just killed my sister." The voice on the 911 line that night didn't sound like a killer. It sounded like a child trapped in a nightmare. Shaky, disoriented, pleading for help. "I thought I was dreaming," he said. "Please, tell me this isn't real." The caller was 17-year-old Benjamin Elliott, a high school honor student. And the victim, his twin sister, Megan. Bright, funny, kind. She was the kind of person who lit up every room she walked into. They weren't just siblings, they were best friends. They shared everything from study sessions to late-night talks about college, life, and growing up. But that night, something inside Benjamin's mind shattered. And what happened next would leave even experienced detectives speechless. When officers arrived at the Elliott home, they found Benjamin sitting on the floor of the hallway. His hands were trembling, covered in blood. The knife still lay nearby. And beside him, Megan, motionless. The officers tried CPR, but the wounds were too deep. She had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck. Her parents stood in shock, screaming, "Why, Ben? What happened?" And all he could say was, "I don't know. I was asleep." At first, detectives thought it was another tragic teenage crime, a fight gone wrong, maybe rage, maybe jealousy. But as they looked closer, they realized there was no motive. No argument. No history of violence. Just a confused boy insisting he did it in his sleep. Benjamin's story sounded impossible, until experts began to consider something chilling. Could a person really kill someone while sleepwalking? It's rare. Almost unheard of. But not impossible. In sleepwalking, or somnambulism, the body wakes up while the mind stays trapped in a dream. People walk, talk, even drive, with no memory afterward. But murder? That's a line very few have crossed. Still, Benjamin's behavior that night matched many symptoms of sleep-related violence. He told the 911 operator details that made no sense if he'd been awake. He said he woke up standing over her. He said he thought he was dreaming. And when he realized what was happening, he broke down. His voice cracked. He cried. He begged for help. You could hear the horror in his words, the disbelief in his own voice. But the investigation didn't stop there. Detectives needed to know if this was really sleepwalking or something much darker. Because when you peel back the layers of any crime, no matter how innocent someone looks, the truth usually hides in the details. So they started asking hard questions. If Benjamin was sleepwalking, how did he manage to walk down the stairs, grab a kitchen knife, then return upstairs, all without waking up? How did he attack with such force and precision? And how did his sister have defensive wounds, proof she tried to fight him off? For investigators, those wounds changed everything. Because if Megan was fighting for her life, wouldn't that wake him up? Detectives began to suspect the unthinkable, that Benjamin was lying. That the sleepwalking story was just a cover for something he couldn't face. Police searched his phone, his laptop, his private messages, looking for signs of anger, conflict, or resentment. But they found nothing. No arguments. No threats. No warning signs. Just a normal teenager who seemed to adore his twin sister. And that was the problem. Nothing fit. Was Benjamin a cold-blooded killer pretending to be innocent? Or was he truly a victim of his own subconscious mind? Psychologists call this parasomnia violence, when the brain misfires during deep sleep, mixing dreams with reality. Victims of this condition have been known to walk, talk, even attack others while dreaming of something entirely different. To them, it's not real, until it's too late. Benjamin's defense team argued exactly that. They said he had a history of sleep disturbances, often talking or moving in his sleep. That night, something triggered a violent dream, maybe stress, maybe exhaustion, and his body acted it out. When he finally woke up, he was already standing over his sister, knife in hand, her blood on his clothes. He screamed, panicked, and called 911 immediately. And if that's true, imagine the horror. Imagine waking up to find out your own hands did something your mind never intended. But prosecutors weren't buying it. They said the sleepwalking defense was just an excuse, a desperate story from a teenager who couldn't face what he'd done. They pointed to the force of the stabs, the movement through the house, the defensive wounds. To them, this wasn't a dream. It was murder. The case tore the community apart. Some people said Benjamin was a monster who deserved life behind bars. Others said he was a broken boy living through a nightmare he didn't create. And his parents were caught in the middle. They stood by him, heartbroken. They said they lost both their children that night, one to death, one to tragedy. At the funeral, Benjamin sat in silence, unable to look at the casket. He kept whispering her name, Megan. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to." Even the officers who arrested him later said they could see the pain in his eyes. He wasn't acting. He looked lost, shattered, like a boy who would never wake up from what he'd done. After months of legal back and forth, the case reached a heartbreaking conclusion. Benjamin was declared mentally competent, but emotionally destroyed. He eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid a lengthy trial. The sentence included custody, psychological treatment, and supervision. And though some felt justice was served, others felt justice could never truly exist here. Because no sentence could bring Megan back, or undo what happened in that house. To this day, Benjamin's family refuses to call him a murderer. They believe something inside him broke that night, something beyond control, beyond reason. Maybe it was a dream that went too far. Maybe it was a moment of madness. Or maybe, just maybe, it was both. Even now, years later, the story still haunts people. Because it forces a question most of us never want to ask. What if we aren't in control of ourselves while we sleep? What if our bodies can act out our darkest fears, before our minds can stop them? Science says it's rare, but not impossible. There are real documented cases of people committing acts of violence while asleep, only to wake up in horror at what they'd done. But Benjamin's story is different. Because he wasn't a stranger. He wasn't unstable or cruel. He was a boy who loved his twin sister more than anyone else in the world. And that's what makes it so terrifying, the idea that love wasn't enough to save her from what he became in his sleep. Today, the Elliott family's home stands quiet. New people live there now, unaware of the tragedy that once unfolded inside those walls. But for those who remember, the house still carries an echo, a memory of that night when reality blurred with nightmare. Every light that flickers in the hallway, every creak in the stairs, it reminds people that the scariest stories aren't always about ghosts or killers. Sometimes, they're about us. About the fragile thread that keeps our waking selves separate from the monsters that hide in our dreams. Benjamin Elliott once said he wished he never closed his eyes that night. Because when he did, he lost everything. His sister. His freedom. And himself. And that's the most chilling part. Because sleep is supposed to be safe. It's supposed to heal. But that night in Texas, sleep destroyed an entire family. So what do you believe? Was Benjamin Elliott a killer who couldn't face the truth? Or a dreamer trapped inside his own nightmare? Maybe we'll never know for sure. Maybe even Benjamin doesn't know. But one thing is certain, that night, something in his mind crossed a line no one could ever come back from. A moment where love, innocence, and horror collided. And now, every time we close our eyes, we have to wonder, what's really waiting for us in the dark? Because sometimes, the scariest stories don't start with evil. They start with something much simpler. A dream that went too far.